My brother thought it was hilarious to lock me out of our shared bathroom. He said, "You're just too slow." So I changed the doorknob to one that only I had the key for. He had to ask permission every time he needed to go. My brother, Basil, has always been the type to push buttons just to get a reaction. He's the older sibling, and he took that role as a license to torment me for most of our childhood. Living with him was like having a non-stop sitcom laugh track in the background of my life, except I wasn't laughing. I was surviving. We grew up in a cramped two-story house in Fairhaven, Pennsylvania. The upstairs had 3 bedrooms and a single shared bathroom. It was a small space for a family of 4, and that bathroom became a source of constant tension between me and Basil. He treated it like his personal lounge, his fortress, and his stage. And for years, I let it slide. I figured that was just life with an older brother. But then things got worse. Way worse. It all started with the lock. Our bathroom door had one of those simple locks you could engage from the inside, a push-and-turn type that locked with a button. That was all Basil needed to turn the bathroom into his little kingdom. He'd lock the door for hours at a time, not even because he needed privacy, but because he thought it was funny. When I needed the bathroom, he'd make a game of it. I'd knock, tell him I had to pee, and he'd yell back something like, "Hold it, Daryl. I'm busy." I'd knock louder, and he'd laugh. Sometimes, I'd hear him playing music in there or scrolling through TikTok videos at full volume. Once, I even caught him lying on the floor doing nothing while I was outside the door panicking because I had to leave for work. The worst part was the smug look on his face when he finally opened the door. He'd come out all casual, acting like it was no big deal, like I was the one overreacting. "You're so slow in the mornings, bro," he'd say. "Gotta move faster if you want bathroom time." It wasn't just inconvenient, it was humiliating. I was a grown man being bullied by my older brother in my own house. I tried talking to him about it. I tried reasoning with him. But Basil didn't listen. He just laughed and told me to lighten up. One morning, everything came to a head. I'd overslept after a long night at work. I had about 20 minutes to shower, shave, and get dressed before my shift started at the hardware store. I ran upstairs, toothbrush in hand, only to find the bathroom door locked. Again. "Basil," I shouted, pounding on the door. "Come on, man. I'm late for work." No response. I knocked harder. "Basil. I'm serious. Open the door." Still nothing. I was about to lose my mind when the door finally creaked open a few inches. Basil was standing there in his towel, toothbrush hanging out of his mouth, grinning like a cat that just ate a whole flock of canaries. "What's the rush, Daryl?" he said, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Gotta wake up earlier, man. You're always so slow." I snapped. I yelled at him. I told him to get out of the bathroom and let me get ready. He just shrugged, grabbed his phone off the sink, and walked out like he hadn't just made me 10 minutes late for work. That day, standing behind the counter at the hardware store, I decided I wasn't going to put up with it anymore. I'd tried being nice. I'd tried being patient. None of it worked. If Basil wanted to play games, I was going to play back, only this time, I was going to win. The next Saturday, I drove out to a different hardware store in the next town over. I didn't want anyone from work asking why I was buying a doorknob, because I knew how small-town gossip worked. I picked up a locking doorknob, the kind that comes with a key, and headed back home. When I got home, I waited until Basil left to hang out with his friends. As soon as he was out the door, I grabbed my toolbox and got to work. It took me less than an hour to switch out the old doorknob for the new one. When I was done, I held the key in my hand and smiled. For the first time, the bathroom was mine. I didn't say a word to Basil about it. I wanted him to find out the hard way. The first test came that evening. I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth when I heard Basil's heavy footsteps thudding up the stairs. He tried the doorknob and found it locked. There was a pause, then a knock. "Daryl. Open up." I ignored him. Another knock. Louder this time. "Daryl, seriously. Open the door." I took my time rinsing my mouth, then walked over to the door and cracked it open just enough to see his face. "What's the problem, Basil?" "You're too slow." He stared at me like I'd just grown a second head. "What are you talking about?" "Open the door." "Sorry," I said, smirking. "I'm busy." I shut the door and locked it again. I could hear him muttering to himself as he stomped back downstairs. Over the next few days, Basil's frustration reached new levels. He tried everything to get back at me. He pounded on the door, threatened to break it down, even tried picking the lock with a bobby pin. None of it worked. I held on to that key like it was a winning lottery ticket. At first, he tried to play it cool, acting like it didn't bother him. But I could see the cracks forming. He'd come upstairs, try the doorknob, and let out this frustrated little sigh when it didn't budge. Every time he had to wait for me to finish, I felt a little spark of satisfaction. Then one night, he snapped. I was in the bathroom shaving when I heard him shouting from the other side of the door. "This isn't funny anymore, Daryl. Let me in." I didn't respond. I just kept shaving. "Daryl. I mean it. Open the damn door." I set down my razor, walked over to the door, and unlocked it. Basil practically fell into the bathroom, red-faced and fuming. "You think you're so smart, huh?" he said, glaring at me. I shrugged. "Maybe. But at least I'm not the one locked out." That's where we are now. Basil's losing his mind, and I'm just sitting back and enjoying the show. My parents are starting to notice the tension, but honestly, I don't care. I'm not backing down this time. If Basil wants to use the bathroom, he's going to have to play by my rules for once. And you know what? It feels amazing. A week went by, and Basil's frustration was at an all-time high. Every time he had to wait to use the bathroom, every time he tried the door and found it locked, I could see the irritation growing. He'd grumble under his breath, slam his bedroom door, or stomp down the stairs like a toddler who didn't get his way. It was glorious. For once, I had the upper hand, and I wasn't about to give it up. But Basil wasn't done. He was never the kind of guy to let something go without trying to win. I knew he was plotting something. What I didn't expect was how petty he'd get. One night, I came home from work to find that the bathroom smelled like death. At first, I thought maybe the plumbing had gone bad, but no. Basil had left a bowl of tuna fish in the bathroom. A whole bowl. He'd shoved it behind the toilet, let it sit for who knows how long, and left it there to stink up the place. "Real mature, Basil," I said, dumping the mess in the trash. The next day, I found my toothbrush in the kitchen sink. Basil just smirked when I confronted him. "You shouldn't leave your stuff lying around," he said. I'd had enough. If he thought he could out-petty me, he was sorely mistaken. It was time to escalate. The next weekend, I made a little trip to the hardware store again. This time, I picked up an additional deadbolt lock, the kind you'd see on a front door. I also grabbed some door wedges, the kind you jam under the door to keep it from opening at all. If Basil thought I was just messing around, he was about to learn how serious I could be. I installed the deadbolt at the top of the bathroom door, well out of his reach without a chair or ladder. It took some effort to drill into the frame, but once it was in place, I tested it out. The bathroom door was now an impenetrable fortress. Then, I added the door wedges to my arsenal for when I was inside. No one was getting in unless I wanted them to. The next morning, I woke up early, grabbed a book and some snacks, and barricaded myself in the bathroom. I locked both the doorknob and the deadbolt, shoved the wedges in, and settled in for what I like to call Operation Basil's breaking point. It didn't take long for him to notice. I heard him come upstairs, yawning and groggy, probably planning to hog the bathroom like always. He tried the doorknob first. Then the deadbolt. Then he started knocking. "Daryl? Knock, knock. What are you doing in there?" "Just reading," I called back. "What's up?" "I need to use the bathroom," he shouted, louder this time. "Sorry, can't hear you over all this peace and quiet." The knocking turned into pounding. "Daryl, open the door." "I'm not kidding." I stayed put. Every now and then, I'd yell something like, "Almost done," or "Hang on," just to mess with him. Meanwhile, I was sitting on the floor, sipping a soda and flipping through a magazine. I wasn't even using the bathroom. I was just enjoying the chaos. About 20 minutes in, he completely lost it. "Mom. Dad." Daryl's locked himself in the bathroom. My parents came upstairs looking annoyed. My mom knocked on the door and said, "Daryl, honey, what's going on?" I opened the door just a crack, enough to see their faces but not let Basil charge in. "Oh, nothing," I said. "Just relaxing." "Why are you locking the bathroom like this?" my dad asked, his voice full of that tired parent tone. "Ask Basil," I said. "He's been locking me out for months, making me late for work, and just being a jerk. So I figured I'd give him a taste of his own medicine." My mom turned to Basil. "Is that true?" Basil looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole. "Well, I mean, yeah, but it's not a big deal." "Not a big deal?" I said. "Tell that to my boss who chewed me out for being late because someone thought it was funny to spend an hour in the bathroom." My parents were quiet for a moment. Then my dad sighed. "Basil, you're 25 years old. Act like it. Daryl, take the lock off the bathroom door." I wasn't ready to back down just yet. "I'll take the lock off when Basil agrees to stop being a jerk and shares the bathroom like a normal person." My dad raised an eyebrow at Basil. "Well?" Basil mumbled something that sounded like, "Fine." I didn't catch that, I said, leaning closer. What was that, Basil? Fine, he snapped. I'll stop hogging the bathroom. True to my word, I took the deadbolt off the bathroom door the next day. But I kept the key for the doorknob just in case Basil ever got any ideas about going back to his old ways. And for the first time in years, I didn't have to fight for bathroom time. Basil actually stuck to his word, probably because he knew my parents were watching him like hawks after the whole ordeal. In the end, I got what I wanted, a bathroom I could actually use when I needed it. And Basil? Well, he finally learned that pushing me too far wasn't as funny as he thought. Now, every time he gives me that smug look, I just smile and say, "Careful, Basil. I've still got that key." And that, Reddit, is how I won the bathroom war. Petty? Sure. But sometimes, the only way to deal with someone like Basil is to play the game better than they do.